Yo, what's going on? This is the NOC, the Nerds of Color, and we are back with another ShoPowSho. I am Kuya P, aka Patrick Michael Strange, Babinka Boy in the house, you're a dope bro, and I'm here with the amazing Ates. What's up, Ates?
Hey!
Great to see you as always. How have y'all been since our last episode? What's been going on? Chilling? Same old.
So enthusiastic, but yes, time has no meaning in quarantine. I saw
that
you
is
like
true. The orange man is still resisting as always. Well, we're getting ready for the holidays, right? We're getting ready for Thanksgiving. I'm very thankful for y'all, thankful for my family and friends that are, still, managing and surviving during this crazy traumatic situation. And thankful for our guests that we're going to have here for today. We have the amazing Emilie Santos Tumale, our first academic, someone who really listened to their parents more so than we did, because you know how we get pushed on, hey, go to college, get your education, get your doctor, do everything. And
I went to
our own path. And no knocks to anybody else that doesn't do that, but props to Emilie for like really putting in the work. Because she also put in the work for our representation, getting out all the knowledge that we need to have as an Asian American community that isn't really out there presented because it's so dominated by other the white culture and other people. So, our representation is being put out there, which it matters. Representation matters. So really proud to have her on. Y'all ladies ready to bring her in?
Yeah. Hype.
All right, here we go. Emilie Santos Tumale. Welcome to the show. What's up? You can unmute yourself. There we go.
Hi. Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah.
I'm gonna throw air horns right there. Let's throw some more of the air horns on. Super high. How are you? Before we start off, maintaining in this crazy COVID-19 times there?
I'm managing. Quarantine has been stressful, but I somehow have gotten through. I went from basically not being able to get anything done at home to suddenly becoming productive. It's like my weird way of coping with the pandemics, and here I am. I think it's kind of evidence of that.
We were all in a rut. That's especially how I was, and then I was like, you know what? I can't let this get me down, and that's kind of how this show finally kicked off. And I'm so thankful for the Ates for joining me and making this happen. I think it's been very therapeutic for the three of us. Yeah. I know for myself, just to, let off the steam, let off, some of the stories I've had bottled inside, and to speak with other people that are just like me and, of my culture and that are doing it big is just amazing. Like you, Emilie. What's that, Tina?
What kinds of stories?
What kind of stories? Oh, you trying to play me again. We're not going to do that right now. We're not going to do that. Maybe later on.
It doesn't work that way.
So Tina, you know how to kick it off. Why don't you kick it off to Emilie with our first question out the gate? So
we want to know, where are you from? Where are your parents from? Like, where are you really from?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So actually, I'm originally from LA County. So I'm originally from the West Coast. So it's really interesting hearing all your experiences, given that you're in like the DMV area. I learned about that term shortly before moving to New York. But yeah, so I grew up for those who have watched Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, like West Covina, that's my area. They put us on the map. And I lived there pretty much my whole life until coming to New York to attend NYU. But my parents, they're both from the Philippines. I know people tell me I look mixed or not Filipino, but my mom is from Pangasinan and my dad is from Northern Mindanao. So yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. So born and raised in West Covina?
Yes.
Or were you okay? So how was life as a kid growing up? And you also mentioned it just a second ago, like you said that some people didn't kind of think you were Filipino. I would assume being in California, they might have thought you were Mexican. I know I get Hispanic a lot. A lot of people think I'm Puerto Rican. So let's talk about that, like early childhood, growing up in West Covina.
Yeah, definitely. So I my area was very predominantly people of color. So, but more so like Asian and Latino. There was like barely any white people. There were a couple like mixed folks, but like back at the time, I just assumed that like everyone was Filipino, regardless of if they were mixed Filipino or not. But yeah, and I definitely people think I'm like almost everything. But being from California, like I was kind of used to well, I took Spanish in high school. So that was like one way of like adjusting. So at least I could like try to talk to people if they do speak to me in Spanish, but it was just something that I was like very used to. So that's like one part of my experience. Yeah. Sorry.
And confuse them even more when you do.
Yeah. No, I think once they realize like, oh man, your Spanish sucks, then like I think maybe that's like but yeah, and then but coming to New York, it was definitely a different thing where people don't know what Filipinos are. People started thinking I was Asian, and I was like, really? Like like it's such a huge cognitive dissonance, but yeah.
So how was that experience for your parents? You seeing them as a child, and from what I understand earlier, you really don't understand Tagalog either, or you don't know Tagalog, or So can you speak on that? Like, what your parents kind of like assimilating, I guess, to the American ways, and how did you feel about that? And did that influence, later on, with your studies?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a mix. So actually, fun fact, my parents are divorced. But even before that, like again, they're from different provinces, so they know their own dialects as well. But they spoke to each other in Tagalog, but it was kind of like that was the language of the adults. And so, but also them being like divorced and like fighting and stuff, like I think me not knowing Tagalog back then, it was like I was looked down upon from other Filipinos. Like I also grew up with a lot of 1.5 generation folks that were like from the Philippines. So they kind of like, would call me taba, like fat, thinking I would understand them. But yeah, so there's that. Sorry, where am I going with this? But yeah, so I feel like so I'm not fluent, but I was fortunate to have taken Tagalog classes at UCLA. And so now I could kind of say like, oh, I can kind of understand, but can't speak. But that's kind of what that process was like for me. Okay.
So how was it then growing up as a youth, and the fact, like I said earlier, how like, how I didn't exactly like, my mom wanted me to become a doctor. I'm sure. Well, I think, just by knowing a lot of other friends, that's kind of like always a push with a lot of us. You're either going to go into being a lawyer or being a doctor or a nurse. I think, for our community, that's, or from just my observance and the people I've been around, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but just the people I've been around, that was always kind of the push. And so how was that for you? Was you always pushed to be in your studies? Did that kind of have an effect on you? Did you want to pursue other things? Or you just you listened to the parents, and you are a parent because you did say your parents were divorced. And how was that? How did that affect you growing up? And how did you overcome any difficulties that, people that are listening to your story and that can relate or in that similar situation can kind of take from right now?
Yeah, it was really interesting how earlier you're introducing me as like, oh, like she listened to her parents, she like went to school. Because for me, it was like, I think as a doctoral student studying education, it's like I'm going to be a doctor, but like not that kind of doctor, So, and I think also in our community, like nursing is just like, because it's such like a secure occupation, that seems like a lot more of like that like Filipino American dream versus someone like me going into grad school to study something that people don't even know. So honestly, actually, like I have 2 degrees in Asian American studies, but I started college as an engineering major. And there was once upon a time I was good at math, but then, things went downhill. Yeah, but then I actually didn't tell my mom that I was studying Asian American studies until literally commencement. I was like, oh, here's the tickets for the Asian Am commencement. And honestly, I didn't know we were gonna have to do like a little speech at the end, but I was legit like anxious and like about to cry. I was like, Mom, I'm sorry, I'm not an engineer. Everyone was like laughing, but I was like, I'm sorry. And and I still kind of feel that.
Oh my God.
Wow, that's hardcore.
So can we talk on that? Because like,
Yeah.
I feel that in every way, you know, we have the things that we want to do, but we always feel like we have to follow, you know, there's like a vibe of, you know, kind of an unspoken thing that we want you to follow this path. Like my mom, I know she unspokenly wanted me to become a doctor and or a lawyer, which to me was like, oh, it's just because that's money making professions. Like not knowing that my heart wasn't in that, even though I probably could have done it. And I was in the debate team in high school. I was in various, you know, clubs that followed certain paths to that degree, but it just wasn't my heart. So how was that for you in that regard?
Yeah, it was definitely a process to like adjust and to, you know, accept that this would be my path. Like beforehand, I kind of had that mentality of like, I'm not the kind to give up. So like I was in marching band. Fun fact, I played the alto sax for like 8 years of my life, but I haven't played since then. But you know, like I was kind of like going through some things in high school and I was like, oh, should I quit? Should I not? But I was like, no, I'm gonna keep going. And then in college, I kind of had that mentality with, you know, being an engineering student as well, even though I was no longer, you know, doing well in classes. I didn't have rapport with teachers. It was during college when I became for the first time, like very aware of like my positionality as like a woman of color in like an engineering classroom where it was mostly men and like like mostly like white and like international student like students.
White dudes as far as the eye can see.
Yeah. And especially in my specific major, because I was studying like aerospace engineering. So there was just like no women versus like civil engineering or like chemical engineering. So like they had their peers. But anyways, yeah. So that was like, it was, yeah. When I was realizing that like, you know, I'm failing my classes, this isn't making me happy. I was kind of like, yeah, okay, I need to make this change. And actually around that time was when the Asians in the Library video came out. I don't know if y'all were familiar with that like really racist thing about.
Oh, I remember hearing about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And
Okay.
so, and UCLA is in the quarter system. So that was literally around like finals week when I was like about to give up being an engineering student. And then, yeah. And then like, interestingly enough, that's when I switched into Asian American studies and was able to like learn that vocabulary of like, understanding what's really going on with that. And like, why is that problematic? So
What made Asian American studies like it's so disparate from engineering? Was there like a course or something that like made you get into it? A trigger?
Yeah. No, I mean, I just have like really eclectic interests. So for me, for instance, like I like math and history, not so much science and English. So I guess that's just kind of how my brain is. But also being at UCLA, there's like a ton of Filipinos but also like a ton of different Filipino organizations. So for instance, like we did have a Filipinos in Engineering Club. But you know, that wasn't enough to really like help me sustain myself in the classroom. But like, so in one of the main orgs, that was kind of something that the students really promoted. They're like, yeah, y'all should take an Asian American studies class or like, you know, take Tagalog, like, you know, we have those resources here. And so I always had that interest, but then when I was studying engineering, I just didn't have room in my schedule. But then, you know, as soon as I gave up on that, I was like, okay, I'm going to go head on into this. And then I think at the time I told my mom, I was like, oh, I'm going to like, I minored in education as well. So I was like, oh, I'll be a teacher. So that was like what I told them instead of like fully switching on to where I am today. I mean, I certainly didn't see myself as like, I never would have imagined I would have been a PhD student in New York. But yeah.
So what made it, was there specific events that made it your why you wanted to do this, why you wanted to pursue this career path? You kind of said like you weren't getting the grades and the engineering, and that kind of was like kind of falling through, and then you chose this. Was there like, I'm just trying to think, was there a specific event, or you just didn't see it occurring, or by de facto, like you said, there was nothing but like a bunch of white male people in this, and you didn't see that empowerment and of yourself as a culture and as a female to talk about that. So is that what kind of drove you to pursue that?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the three. So at least in yeah, among like my peers in LA, or yeah, there's this phrase of like you either stumble upon Asian American studies or you fail into Asian American studies, and I definitely failed into it. So that was kind of it. And again, just like my experience in the classroom, it just like wasn't fulfilling anymore, especially being at a large public institution. Like I became like a number, and it was just completely different from like the more fulfilling experiences I had, in K through 12. But yeah, but like fortunately, when I was able to switch into Asian American studies, I was able to have like that fulfilling education again, even though like some of the classes were lectures, like the general ed classes. It was just like really awesome to see like another Filipino professor or, like TAs and like students and who like really understand your experience, and also being able to see like myself like in what I was reading. It was really valuable for me.
So how much of the Asian American studies was Filipino, or like was, Filipino adjacent, I should say?
Yeah, actually, so that's what makes UCLA unique as well. So we had like about 3 professors. So at UCLA, we also have the Filipino Studies concentration, which now is a minor. They recently came up with a minor. So I was able to take classes in like not just like Filipino language, but also in the major we had like Asian American theater was taught by a Pinay professor, like Asian American literature, and like also I got to learn Philippine history, both like Phil-Am, U.S. relations, and also like pre-U.S. imperialism. So I was fortunately able to have a pretty rich like Phil-Am studies specific education, but I know that's definitely not the case in most universities that don't even have Asian American studies, and then if they do, it definitely is a lot more East Asian centric. So
I was curious. That's really cool. Do you have like a cool Filipino history anecdote that you can tell us? Like a story? I don't want to make you do a whole TED talk, but like
I'm not that great at telling stories, to be honest, but I think, I guess like what
I love fun facts. I'm a Gemini, so that's
I guess like one thing that I find really mind-blowing is so when you think about the Filipino flag, for instance, like the sun and the stars, it's like, I guess TLDR, it's very like Manila, Luzon centric. And I never really thought about it until reading this reading. Like, the rays represent like I don't know, those like 8 original provinces, but then the stars are like Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. But like, that's it, even though there's like so many, obviously different like provinces and cultures, but they're not very well represented in that. And I think even the fact that like, we have Filipino language, it's based on Tagalog, but like, like Bisaya is like the 3rd most spoken language, but there definitely isn't that much like awareness on that. So I guess that would be my tip.
Those are great fun facts.
Yeah,
Thank you.
really
Perfect.
I never thought about
Yeah, it was mind-blowing when I read that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I gotta like look into that because I never really thought about it either. My question is it kind of goes along with that. Was there anything that you learned about like the culture that surprised you, that like you didn't realize, or like knew but didn't know, or knew something new that you learned, I guess, about the culture in school versus living it?
That's a good question. I think for me, one of the takeaways that I've had was actually not really in the classroom, but when I left. So actually, just to like think about like reflecting on my education, like again, since I like basically failed into Asian American studies, it wasn't necessarily something that I was proud of, even though I loved what I was learning. And like I just feel like our culture and like our history is like so important, and like everyone should be able to have access to that. But coming to New York, I was really surprised at how like the history that I was learning was like, oh, that's like West Coast, like those Manongs, like that's just like West Coast or whatever, even though it's like my perspective is like, well, why can't we like claim that history, and so that actually it's like a huge inspiration to like my dissertation research. I'm like, well, okay, if that's like West Coast history, then what's like East Coast history, or like what's New York specific history? Like there's so much there's like so much that for these communities to like offer. And so that's like, again, like why I think your podcast is like very very informative, very inspiring. It's really cool to like learn from you all as well. But I don't know if that, hopefully that.
No, I'm mad humbled by that. I'm like so honored to hear you say that. And actually that was going to be one of my questions. Like, so I'm sure you benefited a lot, like you said, the UCLA community, the amount of Filipinos that are there in Cali, and then, transitioning from there to go to New York, to NYU. And you just stated, that difference in the spectrum of experience and knowledge. So how has it been? How are you going about now? Because you are, getting your doctorate there. Do you like still keep in contact with your people in Cali? And just how have you transitioned? What are you doing? And what would you encourage people that maybe are doing the same thing as well and learning? And also like finding that love, why do you love it so much? And why do you think it's so important for us to know, about our history?
I guess to answer the last question, why do I love it? I think, I'm a Leo, but I have a lot of Virgo placement. So I'm very like one detail oriented, but two, like, I just really like reflecting on like, what did it take for me to get here? And so I think that's why I really liked education studies so much. Like I was able to reflect on like my high school experiences. So like, I wasn't always the college bound student. I went from being kind of like this like regular person with really very low self-esteem to someone who was like suddenly excelling in math. But then of course, when I got into college and was like doing engineering classes, it just like wasn't the same. And so like, I think about like, what was it that like, got me pushed out of, engineering school. And so that's what caused me to be a lot more like critical of things like the model minority myth. And then like within the organization, like within the Filipino orgs at my school, they're very much like, oh, well, we're not part of the model minority myth. That's like an East Asian thing. But then again, coming to New York, suddenly people were thinking of like, well, no, like you are Asian, like you are kind of like a model minority. Like, what are you doing here? Sorry, I was like losing train of thought, but
no worries. Yeah. Go ahead.
So you mentioned that, when you were growing up, that because you didn't speak Tagalog and because, of your appearance, that you might have looked a little bit more mestiza, that people didn't really treat you like you were Filipino, right? So how has your like, I assume that you've really claimed your identity. You're a doctorate student for Asian American Studies, but how was that transition? It sounds like it sounds like a journey.
Yeah, definitely. I think, so I've learned to kind of accept, like, I've learned to like kind of take advantage of that as well. So I feel like by me being this racially ambiguous person, I've been able to kind of be in like other spaces for like students of color. So like I've taken like Chicano studies classes and like I've felt totally comfortable, or with like Pacific Islanders, they're like, yeah, like we're similar, like we're cool, we have similar experiences. And even, so I would say that's like one big plus to it. I've also was really inspired by reading Gloria Anzaldua's work on like, mestizaje. And so I think for me, that's something that has helped me to reclaim being Filipino, but specifically like Filipino American. It's like, we're kind of in that in-between space of like, we're definitely not white. We're not white American, but we're also definitely not like of the Philippines. And so that's kind of how I've like learned to really accept, be really proud of my identity by like accepting that like in-between space, basically.
That's what we're discovering too, because we're all mixed. So it's like, there's this weird disconnect between like claiming culture and kind of celebrating it. And that's for me, one of my goals and journeys with this podcast is kind of learning how to own it and learning how to claim that and learning how to celebrate it. So thank you for saying that.
I also think it's super interesting that you brought up specifically like Pacific Islander, because we've had this talk before where it's like, which box on the SOL, which box on the standardized test do you check? Are you Asian? Are you Pacific Islander? Are you other? What are you, Filipino person? We don't know.
And only check one.
Only one.
Yeah.
Only ever
Like
one.
growing up, like I'm half white. So it's like my race box was always checked white. And I always remember looking at that being like,
Right, especially when
that's
other
it.
people get to check your box. Like
Yes.
that's the worst.
and it was my dad. And I was like, well, Dad's like, my kids are white. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, I guess so.
Yeah, that's rough. Oh my God. Actually, that kind of reminds me. So, and like speaking of again, like spaces where I kind of like blended, like I've also like I took a class on like mixed race studies or mixed race Asian Americans, for instance. And that was actually one of my also like life-changing classes at UCLA, that like really like got me thinking about grad school actually. But there's like this critical mixed race studies conference, I think, and going there, like I was like, oh well, I'm not mixed, but I'm Filipino, and they're like, well, you know, you're like Filipinos are all mixed. So like I'm curious, like what is your experiences like? I guess interacting with other mixed folks, or like, I'm curious about your reaction to that.
Okay. I started telling this story before we started recording, but this is like a prime example of my experiences as a mixed Filipino, a mixed Filipina, a mestiza. So I live with my Lola, and we pick her up Filipino food because she misses the food, and like I don't cook it. Like I don't know all the traditional dishes. I don't know all the names. So it was like 2 weeks ago, I called a Filipino restaurant and I was like, do you guys have peanut butter? And they're like, no. I was like, what? How do you not? Okay. Well, what other like vegetable dishes do you have? And they were just like, you're gonna have to come in and order it. We don't know. And I think they were really busy at the time, and that was fine, but it made me feel very like inferior. And it was kind of like I had failed in that regard. So this week I went to a different Filipino restaurant, and I'm like trying out a bunch of places, and we're in Hampton Roads. This is like the Filipino capital of Virginia. So there's tons of places to pick from. So we're trying different places. And I walk into this place and I see longanisa, and I'm like, oh, I know that, I want that. And then I see another dish that I'm like, okay, it's got potatoes, it's got carrots, it's got vegetables in it. I was like, I want that one. And she's like, okay. And I was like, well, what is it called? And I was afraid to ask because I was like, what is this one called? And she's like, oh, it's menudo. And I was like, oh, I know that word. And she was like, are you half Filipino? And I was like, yeah, I am. And she was like, oh, it's okay. My kids don't know the names of the food either. And I thought that was really, I was just like, thank you. And she's like, you want pancit too? And I was like, yeah, I guess. And so I ordered food, and she just like talked to me, and she was telling me about like her kids and what they like to eat. And she's like, and they're full Filipino, and they eat like sausage and rice, potato omelets, and like these things that are like Filipino to me, but like aren't like menudo and peanut butter and things like that. So I was like, I was a little excited, and she was just super nice. And she's like, well, I hope you like it, and please come back. And I was like, thank you. I cried in my car. I walked out of that restaurant and I cried. And it was just because I felt so seen, because it wasn't like, oh, you're half Filipino. Like, yeah, you don't know what this food is. It was like, oh, you're half Filipino. Like here is a part of you. And like, I just remember that being like it was such a triggering thing for me the week before, feeling less, and then being like kind of brought into it. And like, I just cried in the car. It made me miss my mom. It made me like really feel like kind of the loss in my life of where I'm missing Filipino things. And then I felt so seen, and it was, yeah. So still have, sorry, I'm like, I still have those like kind of experiences where it's like, I don't feel like I'm enough, but then like, just, it takes one person just being like, oh, hi, like we're family just in this regard, and I'm going to share this food with you. And yeah, it was really nice. So,
Love you, Tina.
That's really sweet. That's a really good story.
Yeah.
No, I don't really know that I have too many. Like grew up really white. And so I don't know anything. And so I just don't do that. I don't go to Filipino restaurants because I would have to just point, and I'm not comfortable doing it. I've actually dragged white boyfriends to Filipino places before, because then we could act like he doesn't know and I don't know, and it's okay. Like, I feel like I have 100% imposter syndrome at all times.
Oh.
At all times. I don't think, like, I don't know. I never hung out with like Filipino kids growing up. Like, they were always in like a different group. I was really nerdy, so I was in like a nerd group, but I never like had Filipino friends growing up. I didn't see, like, my cousins that I had that were in the area, I didn't see very often because our family situation was awkward. But even then, they were significantly older than me. So even when the few times that we would hang out, it would be like taking your little cousin to the park or whatever, like taking me out to Busch Gardens or something. We didn't really talk. I didn't really learn anything about them. So, you know, for me, like, the whole experience is just totally alien to me. Tina helps a lot.
I bring her to my house and I feed her corned beef.
She does.
And make her potato omelets, and we make lumpia, or we will make lumpia.
We will make lumpia. Yeah, it's on our to-do list.
I wonder, Kat,
Oh,
like,
nice.
how do you feel? Do you think that's you being disconnected from Filipino culture? How has that affected you relating to like other cultures or other Asian cultures? Sorry, other Asian cultures.
Are you because I'm a weeb?
I'm insinuating that she's
Yeah,
a weeb,
because
yes.
I'm a weeb. Thanks. Yeah. I don't know.
Kat can read between the lines.
I can. I don't know if that's like a thing. Maybe I try not to be like cringe weeb. But I am like moving to Japan. So I don't know, maybe I am kind of cringe weeb.
She's living the weeb dream. She got a job in Japan.
So
She's jet set in January.
first of all, how dare you? And second of all, maybe that is, one of the things that I'm looking forward to when going to Japan is I do know that there are a significant number of Filipinos who live there and work there, even if they don't necessarily have the greatest jobs. And so I would really love to be able to talk to some Filipinos while I'm over there and ask them about their experiences, because I think it'd be interesting.
That's
But
gonna be an episode.
yeah, that'll be an
Oh,
episode.
that'd be so cool. Actually, I have a kuya that moved to Japan. Fun
Oh,
fact.
cool.
But yeah, have y'all watched Kita Kita? It's this like Filipino like romance movie. And it's like set in Japan. Y'all should watch it.
Okay, Kita Kita.
That's like,
I'm
Yeah,
write that down.
It's really sad. It's a tearjerker.
Oh,
isn't it like old school? Like
I'm so sensitive nowadays. I don't know if I can take it, but I watch.
I know, I can't
Um,
keep watching sad things.
Oh, like the Disney holiday Filipino.
Oh, yo, we're gonna have to talk about that later, or we can talk about it now. But we're now doing parole making as a tradition in our family now. With my family, you know, my mom, my wife and daughter, we bought the supplies via Amazon over the week.
Oh, I saw the post. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yep.
I
Yeah,
watched-
I was crying my ass off watching that Joker.
Look, I live with my Lola, and then
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I called my mom. I had to call my mom. Like, Mom, I love you. Mahal kita.
like that was so sweet. It's the Mickey ear and everything. I lost it, man. I'm like, you're gonna have to link this video so that like people can know what we're talking about. They're like, what?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh.
Yes. Man.
So
So
sensitive right now.
Sorry, we got derailed. We got
Yeah.
our feels for a minute.
Emily got us revealing ourselves. She was like, "We're gonna flip the tables." This is the first interview where she flipped it onto us.
I know.
Like,
She's asking us questions. This is wild. I love it. Please continue.
No, honestly though, I think like, yeah, these episodes, or especially the one where you all talk about yourselves, it's like, it's very much like, you know, those are the experiences that I'm very interested in hearing. And it actually reminded me of like the interviews I did for my dissertation research. So sorry though to switch it around.
No, we love it. This is great. Yeah.
Remember what I told you at the start of this? I was like, oh, you've been watching episodes. We don't need to talk about ourselves.
Little did we know.
Yeah. Flipped it and reversed it.
I know, right? She's smart. She's smart. I tell you. So you're pursuing your doctorate at NYU. I now remember the question I had earlier. So yeah, so you're pursuing your doctorate at NYU, and you've made this what's your focus now. going back to your mother. So how has that relationship changed? Maybe how's she feeling about that? Where are you at now with that relationship? Because we know how strong that child Filipino mother relationship can be, and and how they feel about us and our pursuits.
Yeah. So honestly, I would say our relationship is very contentious. So, like I said, I'm a Leo. So is my mom, and a Scorpio moon. So she's like, we're very like, she's very secretive. I'm a Sag moon, so I'm very judgmental. So
moon signs and stuff. I'm like, Scorpio moon. Oof.
yeah, and my sister too. Oh my
that
gosh.
makes
But well, actually, yeah, going back to the earlier question about like me like not pursuing nursing, I think that's like another thing, like because I have two siblings. I'm the only one that is, pursuing this path. And so there's that. But then like it's kind of, I feel like my sister kind of helps satisfy that, in that like she's the one who's like about to be a nurse. Like she's actually, yeah.
I was saying too, by my big sister. She's the nurse. Mom's
Yeah.
like,
But yeah, I think I do feel like, distance makes the heart grow fonder. I feel like going to college, even though it wasn't that far from home, but like because I can't drive, it felt very far. It's like it's a 3-hour commute, public transit. No one should do it, but that's what I did sometimes when my mom was tired of picking me up. But yeah. And then coming to New York, I think has made me appreciate family, appreciate home a lot more. But at the same time, I don't know, in this pandemic, I'm kind of not complaining about being stuck in this tiny apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My turn. Okay, so this is my thing I like to ask every female guest that we have. How has being a woman of color influenced your journey and your, I guess, your academic leanings?
Yeah, so well, definitely right off the bat, one, it got me pushed out of engineering, I feel like. But two, I feel like I'm a lot more reflective, or just like aware of like other types of identities. So like not just gender, but also like sexuality. And also nowadays, like a lot more like critical of like fat phobic things, especially in our community with like, in the Philippines, like everyone is like they don't look like us. They definitely don't look like me. They're all like brown, short. Well, I'm short too, but like, and skinny, right? But I don't know. I feel like it's very contentious. Sorry, where was I going with this? But yeah, so being a woman of color also, I feel like, especially in academia, it's just like so hard, like there's this idea that like Asian Americans do well and Asian women do well because of, their white partners or whatever. But at the same time, the reality is that Asian women have like one of the lowest rates of tenure. So, and you think about like who's being published, there's so few Filipino women scholars that folks even know about. So I guess that's like one way that like being a woman of color is like influenced me to like be very mindful of like these different, hierarchies or like, obstacles that I feel like I have to face as a student, and especially as one of the very few, definitely, yeah, one of the few, people of this like positionality in the academy. So
That's awesome, though. I mean,
Right.
yeah, represent. Yeah, that's fantastic. But no, I agree that, fat phobia and, colorism, I mean, those are things that just don't get talked about enough but that's just because Filipino culture, like, doesn't get much attention. I feel like on the national stage, as far as like American experiences.
Do you know what does get talked about? Snarky aunties. It's like that's what gets talked about. Not what the snarky aunties are saying. Like, ooh, getting fat. Ooh. Like, thanks.
Tell it. Real shit. That's so real.
There's a lot to unpack, you know.
Boys get it too. We get it too, but y'all get it the worst. I feel so bad for my Panay sisters. Y'all get torn up when I see the aunties together sometimes, man. Question I had that reminded me is so as you were pursuing your degree and your doctorate, any recommendations like I just devour anything about our culture when I come across it and I hear about this movie or this book. Recommendations, both Asian American studies and Filipino American specific, that you've come across that you would suggest, or authors you recommend to those of us that are looking to learn about our history?
So, fun fact, I actually have a list of resources on my website. Well, it's
Okay.
not public, but so if you do have like specific recommendations or want specific recommendations, just let me know. But I actually speaking of women of color, I connected with folks who were in Gabriela, which is a like Filipino feminist organization. And they were like, "Oh, do you have anything by Pinay authors?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a good idea. Let me like put that list together." So for instance, that's like one thing I have. But I'm also very inspired by other Filipino scholars that, you know, study education, immigration, things like that. And I think another topic that we also really should think about is like settler colonialism. So of course, like Thanksgiving's coming up, and it's complicated though, you know, because it's like you're celebrating indigenous genocide. And,
Exactly.
you know,
My
yeah.
boy just put up a Twitter post today that why are we still celebrating, you know, this white god, you know, why aren't we, you know, celebrating our indigenous culture? You know, yeah. I'm totally tearing up his tweet, but I was like, yeah, man, I feel that way all the time. Like, yeah, because we're still such a Christian Catholic, you know, community, and I was raised that way. But I have friends that are Muslim. I have friends that are, you know, this, that, and the third, and I've, you know, try to learn about all those other cultures, and it's just there's all these biases, and it's like I can't just get down with one because I'm not down with that bias. So, you know, and knowing my history of the Philippines, because again, like I devour that, and finding out that it was like Magellan that brought that stuff over and convinced that Datu, you know, to get down with it, and that was his way of kind of colonizing, you know, the Philippines. That just like, you know, why? And yeah, it tears me up. And I love that, you know, when you find out about yourself, and that's why I want to, you know, devour any information when people, you know, have it that I respect and that I think is worthy knowledge to know. So, yeah.
Patrick has his favorite stories.
The Battle of Mactan, which I plan to produce later on with the gorgeous Xavier de Guzman.
Don't indulge her.
The glorious hair.
You know, the 500th anniversary
what's his name?
is coming
Isaacs?
up, right? That's right. You know, the 500th year anniversary of Battle Mactan is coming up.
Yes.
2021.
That should be an episode.
You know, that's when I should, you know what, if I can get ABS-CBN to fund my trip, because I've never been to the Philippines, that's one of my goals of life, is to visit our homeland. That would, you know what, next year would be the perfect time for that. See, Emily just got me goals. Let me write this down too. That's
well, I mean, once COVID goes away.
True. COVID has to be, we have to have a vaccine. We have to be good with that. But I'm also scared of Duarte. You know, what do you think, Emily, what do you think as a scholar and what he's doing? To me, he's as, if not as evil, if not worse than Trump. Or how do you feel about Duarte, period? I don't know if you feel that same way. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I would say it's definitely messy. I learned from my cousins who live in Mindanao. They use the hashtag, or they refer to Duterte as tutae. Tutae means poop. So, but also I have this sign right behind me: activism, not terror.
Nice.
Those are my politics. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm scared. Like, that's one of my goals. But with right now, yeah, because that guy just has people killed. Like, if he wants to have you killed, he'll kill you. I'm very scared. And right now, I'm so scared for our homeland with the typhoon that just went down. You know, it's very sad. But that is goals to visit the homeland. Have you been, Emily? Have you you know, taken any trips and, you know, with your career path and what you're looking for, any like stories that you're learning when you ever go back that you aren't learning you know, here that you want to pursue or let the world know about with what you're doing?
So I went to the Philippines twice, but it's been over 10 years since I went. So the first time I went was like middle of high school. And for me, like, my parents are the only ones out of their siblings to be in the US. And so pretty much all of my like first cousins are like legit cousins, not fake cousins. I don't know if y'all have those as well.
Oh yeah.
True.
Family.
Yeah. So like all my like first cousins were in the Philippines. And they're great. But I think for me, and then the second time I actually went by myself as like a graduation gift. I didn't have a debut like other bougie Philams. But yeah, and then that was actually like right before I entered college. But I think for me, again, kind of what I was mentioning earlier, just like realizing how much I stand out. So I don't know, it's like I have a complicated relationship, with going to the Philippines, as much as, I love my relatives and I would love to meet them all. But at the same time, they're all also kind of going all over, because I do have relatives who are like OFWs, including like the one in Japan. I have, relatives in like the Middle East, Canada. But yeah, I think for me, something that I learned again, was just like realizing, I feel like you can't really understand like the poverty or things like that until you see it firsthand in the provinces. And even kind of of course, in Manila as well. It's very intense. And I think, the photos from like the typhoons right now, they don't really give it justice. Like, I mean, yes, you could see like the conditions, but I think it's like another thing to like actually like be there in person. So I think that's just like a FYI kind of thing.
I know it's going to wreck my heart. Seeing just sparingly some pictures and video here and there, it's going to wreck me. But at the same time, like it's like my soul needs to go and visit, just to have that experience and set foot.
It's definitely life-changing.
Yeah.
And again, I think it'd be interesting I don't know if any of you all have also been as well, but
Nope.
especially, kind of that like the colorism, like privileging like mestizos. Like I interviewed someone who was like Filipino and white. And when he went to the Philippines, they kept on asking him like, oh, do you sing? Like you should be like a movie star or things like that. So I don't know, just a warning in case anyone
my gosh.
is trying to scab you.
That's
Yeah.
we talked about that a couple times, and how that's going to be an episode, how like mestiza, that like the mixed beauty standards is like, like you look at Filipino models and they're all, Filipino and European, like they're all mixed, and that's like, ooh, that's what the standard is. And it's like, so there's such a dissonance there with like looking mixed, because you're held to this beauty standard, but then you're also like not fully Filipino.
Yeah. So you don't speak Tagalog, or you didn't grow up here, XYZ. We get all of that kind of like stigma, but then also somehow, but we have nice noses or something, or whatever it is that they're trying to like focus on us as being like not as being like an ideal above the. So I don't know. It's you're both like the most excellent Filipino and not Filipino at all, and that's so weird. I don't get it. I don't understand.
It's just.
But it's true.
It's not fair.
It's not something. It's something you have to like, acknowledge. Like I've only met my father once. But when I did meet up with him, we just had a lot of awkward conversations of like, Vanessa Hudgens. She's Filipino. Yeah, I know. That's cool. But that was it. It was just like listing random people that it might be Filipino. That was him teaching me my culture, I think. And then we had, one of those quintessential plug and play microphones, right? And he would make me do karaoke like every night for like an hour, but he wouldn't sing. He would just watch me sing. And then at one point he was like, if you had been here growing up, you'd probably be like really famous. And I was like, that's weird.
That's a really good karaoke. Like she's got a really good voice.
But the fact that it's like, I mean, he's being a doting father trying to, but the fact that that's like a compliment, like, hey, you're mixed, you could go places, kid. Like that's a weird compliment. I don't like that. Thank you though.
Yeah, that's heavy.
Yeah. I've gotten that so much, and it always made me feel like terrible. It made me feel weird, just uneasy. I didn't like that.
Yeah, it's icky, it's uncomfortable, and it's just like
because they're not praising you for like being pretty. Okay, it was like so this was like it was something that when I was growing up I always thought of as like the white librarian thing, So I was always in the library when I was growing up. I love books. I was reading, I read all the time. And I was one of those kids that would like get a different, like switch books every day.
Nerd.
I was a super nerd. Leave me alone. I hadn't discovered anime yet. So that was all I could do was read. But usually, you know, I would end up being like a librarian's pet because I came in regularly and I was polite to them and I was always reading. And if they suggested something to me, I would read it because what the hell else am I doing with my time? But almost universally, at some point, every white librarian, and I went to a lot of schools because I was Navy, would come up to me and say, "Oh, you are so pretty. You're such a pretty little girl." And that should be where the conversation stops, but it never stopped there. It always turned into the like, "What are you? Where are you from?
Where are you from? Where are your parents from? No, where are you really
and
from?"
they were always white. And it was always this thing, like I would always leave the conversation, even in like third grade, going, they like me because I'm just brown enough to be interesting, but not so brown that I am like obviously identifiably ethnic. And it was just creepy and I didn't love it, but that was like, but you're polite, you know, you're polite kids, how your parents raise you. So you just kind of take it as like, you know, a thing that happens. But I, you know, that's definitely, I think that mixed kid problem thing where you're nice looking because you don't fit the standard in a white way. It's weird.
Yeah, it's strange. It's weird sometimes too. Like I'm on Instagram a lot, and like I've done modeling stuff, and it almost feels wrong to tag my things like Filipino and Filipina and all that because it's like I'm not quite there. But then like tagging it all like mestiza and like mix and stuff is almost like gloating it. And it's just weird. Like you're just, like Patrick said, you're just in this uncomfortable kind of middle position with it.
And tags do make things extra odd.
Yeah, and that's just Instagram and social media algorithms, and it's another beast.
Yo, don't you also kind of feel like, you know, because labeling is like the worst of society, and that's what society is about throwing labels on stuff. And tags is now the accepted form of labeling. What did you say?
That's so weird,
isn't it crazy? Like that whole, I think I just blew Emily's mind. Like that is
That
now
really
how
did.
make it acceptable, right?
like hashtags are like now like this cultural norm, but then also it's like, okay, I feel weird using one or the other. And spoiler alert, I use both. Because like when does it become like, I don't know. It's weird, but then how can I then be the representation for Filipino American or for mestiza? You know, it's like, if I don't use them, then I'm denying myself. If I do use them, I'm just stuck in limbo. So it's like, I use them and just deal with the dissonance.
That's maybe somebody's thesis, like the psychological ramifications of using hashtags with an ethnic hashtags. I don't know, like some sociological study on it. I'm just saying.
Straight up on that regard, like when I was trying to like do earlier posts and thinking about, you know, marketing ShoPowSho and trying to get it out to the community, like I was like, should I do Filipino? But if I shouldn't just do hashtag Filipino, I should also do hashtag Filipina. But then, you know, because, you know, you want to have the male and the feminine aspects there. But then maybe I should just do Filipinx or do all three. And then what if not using the F, but like the indigenous roots, doing like P with using the PILIPNO, you know, just all that coming into play, and just then you're like your list is like a mile long now, and then you don't even have enough space to say what you're gonna say because you have all these hashtags you're trying to get across. It's crazy right now. And then because I don't want to offend, you know, you have to watch that, and if you don't know, you don't know, you know, and it's wild, man.
I was writing the bio for our coffee link, and I was like, should I just mention up front that like we're all mestizos? Like, is that like a pillar of like our podcast, of our point of view?
I mean, it is,
like,
but I feel like that's I don't know. I just like I feel like when I say that I'm Filipino, that's something that I'm claiming for myself. And then when I'm being labeled as mestizo, it's saying like I'm diluted. I don't know. I just like using that as a determiner for myself. It doesn't feel like, you know, it's more like a qualifier. Like, I am Filipino. That is it. But if someone wants to have a discussion and they want to have the where you from conversation, then we can go into the specifics of being mestiza. But otherwise, Filipino is my umbrella term. And there are probably people that would argue with me and say that my experience isn't the Filipino experience. But at some point, you have to decide on your own labels. And so I'm claiming that I am Filipino, I am Filipina, that's me.
And this is the journey of our podcast. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, that's
I
it.
love it.
86
Yeah.
Emily has us just turning this all on us and reanalyzing everything. Like, here comes the doctor into the room. Like,
we were like, we're just gonna ask her so many questions, and then
You sly dog. You've got me monologuing.
this is the Emilie Tumale takeover right here.
She accepted us. What happened?
So we gotta flip it back on her. Let's do what we do before we forget. Kat or Tina, throw it on her. You know what we do to put it back onto them real quick.
So our favorite question to ask at the end of the podcast is, what is your nerdiest interest? What is the one thing, topic, fandom that you are the biggest nerd about?
you could TED talk about it.
Yes.
Okay, I feel like I can't claim being nerdy in that sense, but
Wait, nerdiness is not about a topic. Nerdiness is the mode of consumption. So when you're just lost in the sauce, consuming it, binge watching something, looking up Wikipedia articles, reading every single book in a series, that kind of nerdy consumption.
Doesn't have to be pop culture.
Yeah.
I got you then. So I guess in that case, I'm a huge fan. I'm slightly behind on episodes, but I'm a huge fan of Steven Universe. My partner got me these cups. They're so great.
Nice.
Oh, that's cute. I like that.
Yeah. So I don't know if y'all have watched the show before, but it's like, sorry?
I've dabbled.
Oh, okay. Well, so fun fact, there's at least 4 Pinay voice actors or 4 Filipino voice actors in the show. So including one of the main characters, Pearl, she's Filipino.
Oh, really?
That's really cool.
That's so cool. I didn't know that.
I will give you a sneak preview that some of them will be coming onto the ShoPowSho very soon there, Emily.
Oh, really?
So stay tuned. I already have them lined up.
No,
We really did.
I didn't even know you girls know yet either. I wasn't sure if y'all were Steven Universe fans, but I've been working in the background a little bit, working some stuff. So stay tuned.
So much. So yeah, so that's something I'm nerdy about. I listen to the podcast. So
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
See, that checks all the boxes with nerds.
Yeah.
You
And
can
you
totally
don't
claim
have to be I hate that ranking system. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to be you don't have to have seen every episode. You don't have to, be able to win every trivia contest. You just have to be really into it. And that's all.
Yeah. And I feel especially nowadays, because nerd culture is pop culture, everyone immediately goes to oh, Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, DC, nerdy pop culture thingies. But we had Rodney on, and he was a nerd about politics, and he's we're oh, what's your favorite president? Chavi was a nerd about chess, and I was oh, cool, I'm gonna crush your dreams. So you could be a nerd about anything. I'm a nerd about rocks.
She loves rocks.
Yeah,
I love that.
And
Yeah. I this is the weird thing that I put on my Tinder profile is I will Google a food or Wikipedia a food while I'm eating that food because I want to know the history of the food, but only while I'm eating it. So I know a lot about apples, specifically.
she hides her weediness.
So I just like to research the food while I am eating the food.
And Kat likes fun facts.
And it adds to my fun fact repertoire. So
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Emily, with the future and, once you're done with your degree, what are some of the things you're looking to do? Have you kind of charted a path now with your degree. I recently saw that you were on with, I'll say it as well. You know, we have the gorgeous Xavi de Guzman up there in Canada. You were on with Justin Trudeau, who's, you know, pretty foxy himself. How was that experience? And, you know, tell us about that.
Oh my God. I like how you phrased it in terms of like, what's the future for you? And also tell me about Justin Trudeau, because I
see big things with you. You're doing big things. Holla.
Thank you. Like, honestly, even the fact that like, you know, you sent the Google invite as like, oh, Emilie Tumale, academic. I was like, oh my God, like that's so, you know, because like academia is it's super competitive. Like I'm currently applying for like funding right now to figure out how I'm going to finish this degree without, you know, trying to work a ton of jobs. But, you know, I just want to be, you know, in the community, whether or not it is, you know, as like your regular tenure track professor or, you know, like, so that's why I like to label myself as like a community educator. But so the Justin Trudeau thing, that was because of, I attended a conference in Montreal that was organized by Filipino Canadians. That was called Pinay Power 2. So it's like a continuation, or it was originally meant to be like kind of a continuation of this one book, Pinay Power, that talks specifically about like Pinay Filipino American issues. So I guess that's like a reading recommendation. But it was really cool to learn about the conditions of Filipinos in Canada. And so I made it was a very life-changing experience. I got to connect with folks there. And so my friend Viz Lumen is part of this organization for Filipino youth called ANAC. It's an acronym though. It's not Anak Bayan. And so Trudeau actually was speaking with Filipinos in Manitoba about like, what are the conditions there due to COVID. And so one thing I learned from that webinar, actually, fun fact, Winnipeg and New York City have the same population number of Filipinos.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, I learned about the recent New York numbers from the de Blasio Phil I'm History Month video. So it's 80,000. But then, you know, obviously New York is massive versus like Winnipeg. So yeah, so, you know, we're out there.
We in here. Like social links where we can find you.
Yeah, so I'm on, well, again, I have my website, so it's emilietumale.com. I also have a Twitter. My handle is Emilie Tumale, and my Instagram is miss.emily. So yeah.
Nice. We'll follow you.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Emilie. You are amazing. Thank you for coming on, joining us, and inspiring us, and turning the tables on us, and helping us, you know, get a little bit introspective ourselves. But I'm humbled and honored by, you know, you saying with what you do, you know, kind of like how we're kind of like a sphere that people in your work can also kind of get that kind of information, get that that culture, and inspire and teach others with that. So thank you so much. Appreciate you. Yeah.
We love to hear it. I love to hear it.
You're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for having me. I'm very honored to be here.
All right. That was the amazing Emilie Santos Tumale. Very appreciative for her coming on, although she did flip it on us, but we still love you for that. It's just helping us kind of just create and tell the story that we want to tell, our Filipino American story of, you know, just, you know, going, you know, living and existing in these current times. So we thank you for that. And we appreciate you for sharing yourself, Emilie. Kat and Tina, how was that for you guys as well? You guys opened up, and we all kind of shared some stuff we didn't really know too much about each other, again, which I think is always beautiful when I can know more about you guys when I already feel I know you.
Yeah, it's really, again, like I feel so seen. Being able to kind of talk about these experiences, and then kind of being able to talk about it in a way that I know that I'm not alone with it, that this is just kind of part of that experience and then part of who I am. So it's therapy. Did you say that earlier?
Yeah. I always love to hear from, you know, Filipino making moves. So that's always exciting for me.
Yes.
We love to.
definitely want to have that representation. Is like I said, I got part of the reason I wanted to do this was for my daughter, have her see amazing females like yourselves, and then having an amazing female like Emilie Santos Tumale, Rosalind Abacobribus, Denise Cabanella, some of the great ladies we've had on thus far. Just that representation means a lot to me as a father, and having a young daughter who's, coming up with this stuff. So very beautiful. And thank you both for being just amazing representation that you both are. Man, this was great. It's by the time this episode drops, we already have had Thanksgiving, but we're recording right around almost Thanksgiving. I'm so thankful for you both. Let's let them know how they can hit us up online. Oh, don't we have something awesome that they can do if they really want to support us, ladies, that we can talk about now?
If you guys really want to support us, help us along this journey of exploring Filipino culture and digesting it for people that are curious, or for people that are in this community, our fellow Filipinos out there, our fellow mestizos out there. You can support us on Patreon, and Coffee, which the links will be posted below.
Yeah, definitely. If you can help us out, we have some regular fees that we have to do every month to keep up our audio podcasts streaming everywhere on iTunes, Spotify, and all that. So it would be a great help to us there, and just also some of our future goals in having us all to, travel to various locations to do the show, get material to do the show. We have Kat that's going all the way to Japan. We want to be able to connect with her and hopefully maybe fly her back to do some stuff, or fly us over there to do stuff with her. You know what I'm saying, Tina? You ready to fly over to Japan? I know I am. So yeah, if you could support us in any way, we'd greatly appreciate it. Join the Sena Gang or the Hala Hala Homies, which I loved putting together. So much fun. And well, we also have a TikTok thanks to Kat. Some of our clips up there. Do you want to talk about the TikTok and maybe future stuff we're going to throw up on there? Maybe some dance videos or something? Karaoke?
Patrick will be posting some of his dance videos.
What about the karaoke, girl? Like some lip syncing or something?
Maybe some karaoke. But yeah, it's right now we're kind of putting some clips from some of the older shows just to kind of get a feel for it. But we'll definitely have some behind the scenes kind of fun things that you might miss out on that just don't quite make it to the full episode. So you'll definitely want to check us out, ShoPowSho on TikTok.
Comment, subscribe,
Yes.
check us out, share your experiences. We're on here talking about our experiences, but it really is us exploring the culture. So do it for the culture, talk to us, support us, and keep coming back for more.
Yeah, let us know, because that could help us in targeting what we want to talk about and focus on what really needs to be talked about and spoken on. So please do. And if I'm limber enough, I will, I used to be a B-boy. I might jump on the TikTok and do a little bit of dancing.
Yeah.
Just in case, you know what I'm saying? But y'all got to communicate first. Y'all got to follow.
Yeah, you got to want it. You got to tell him that you want to see Kuya P in the TikTok dances.
Hey, back in the day, I'll put it out here right now. One of my songs I used to dance to when I was in the strip club. Yes, I danced in the strip club once. I'm not gonna lie. I used to break it. Y'all didn't even know that. Yeah. Back in my day when my body was tight from playing football, I did it to Jenny Wine's My Pony. I ain't gonna lie.
Classic.
What a
Yes.
So you want to see a brother break it down, but I don't think I'm limber enough nor built like that anymore.
We'll start stretching.
I might give you a little something.
Like some comments.
Yeah.
We got so many stories to tell. I'll tell you what. So tell them how they can find you, Kat, online and all that.
Cataphoric on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok.
Mm-hmm. And you can find me on Instagram and TikTok, viva.valentina, and on Twitter, Viva Valentina XO.
Hey, kisses and hugs. Show them love. I love them so much. The amazing Ates. I am Kuya P, aka at Strange Since 1977, and then at Temple Far East. You can follow me there, Twitter and IG. You can follow me at the New Release Wednesday and at the NRW. That's my big pop culture sphere platform, and for more POC centric content at the Nerds of Color. That's everywhere at the Nerds of Color, and here at ShoPowSho. We love y'all. Mahakita, salamat. Till next time, we appreciate y'all. We out of here. Deuces.